The evening started out like any other. Laura was cooking dinner, humming to herself in the kitchen, and Max was playing with his favorite toy car, zooming around my feet as I tried to finish up a few work emails. Life felt predictably, comfortingly mundane. We'd been together for almost a decade, built a life that seemed solid, even admirable to those on the outside, a nice home, successful careers, and most of all, our 3-year-old son, Max, who was our joy. Then my phone vibrated, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced down, expecting the usual work notifications or an update from Laura about her plans for the next day. But the notification showed a message from an unknown number. Curiosity piqued. I opened it. The first thing I saw was a photo. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, because it looked like me. A younger version of me, with a woman leaning close, laughing. She was smiling up at me like she knew me well. There was something so familiar about her face, her light blonde hair, and her eyes that seemed to glimmer with a secret. The message underneath sent a chill through me. Your past won't leave you. My stomach twisted. I couldn't place the moment at all. The me in that picture looked happy, carefree, qualities I barely recognized in myself these days. I felt like I'd been thrust into someone else's life. But no, it was undeniably me, and it was unnervingly personal. Dinner's ready, Laura called from the kitchen, snapping me out of the trance. I put my phone down, forcing myself to smile as I joined them. I must have looked distracted, though, because Laura noticed right away. Is everything okay? She asked, brow furrowed in concern. Yeah, just some last-minute work things, I lied, glancing over at Max to avoid her gaze. Her concern melted into a warm smile as she brushed it off, pouring soup into Max's bowl and ruffling his hair. I managed to smile back, but my mind was racing, spinning with questions that had no answers. As we ate, I found myself stealing glances at Laura, wondering how well I really knew her and now, how well I even knew myself. Later that night, after putting Max to bed, I slipped away to my office, pulling up the photo once more. I searched my mind for any memory of this woman, any link to the photo, but nothing came. It was like a piece of my own life had been erased, leaving behind only a haunting message and a stranger with a familiar face. The next morning, the same number pinged me again. This time, there was a short message. Let's talk. I tried to shrug it off, convincing myself that this was some scam or prank. But curiosity and an unsettling sense of urgency drove me to reply. Who are you? The response was almost immediate. Someone you used to care about. Meet me if you want the truth. My grip tightened around the phone, my mind racing. Who was this woman? Was she just trying to mess with me? Or was there something more to it? There was an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach, a nagging voice that told me I couldn't ignore this. I wrestled with my instincts. Part of me wanted to delete the messages, chalk it all up to a scam, and move on. But a stronger part of me needed answers, to understand the meaning behind the photo and the cryptic message. I decided to take the chance. Against my better judgment, I replied, when and where? The reply came quickly. Greenwood Cafe, 3 p.m. I barely slept that night, replaying every possible scenario. When morning finally came, I tried to focus on Max and on helping Laura with breakfast, but I was distracted, unable to shake the curiosity and suspicion growing in my mind. I told Laura I had a business meeting that afternoon. She didn't question it, too busy prepping Max's lunch and organizing her own schedule. As the time neared, I found myself at the cafe, almost feeling like a criminal, glancing around as though everyone else knew I was there to meet a stranger. I scanned the cafe for anyone who looked remotely familiar, and then I saw her. She sat in the corner by the window, her blonde hair tucked neatly behind her ear. She looked at me with a knowing smile that was both unnerving and oddly familiar. Hello, Jack, she said as I approached, her voice soft but firm. It was clear she wasn't here to play games. Who are you? I managed to say, though my voice came out weaker than I intended. She tilted her head, as if studying me. Vivian, she said simply, as if that name alone would answer all my questions. But it only raised more. I shook my head, trying to piece together anything. Why did you send me that picture? And what's this about my past? Vivian's gaze softened a little, as though she was deciding how much to reveal. She leaned forward and spoke with a quiet urgency, Jack, there are things you don't remember. Things that happened before Laura. What are you talking about? I asked, both frustrated and curious. She looked at me sadly, almost as if she felt pity for me. You were in an accident, Jack. A bad one. You lost your memory. And Laura, she took advantage of that. Her words hit me like a punch. My mind flashed back to Laura, to the years we'd spent together, to the memories we'd built. It all felt solid, real, and yet, Vivian's gaze held a certainty that shook me to my core. She let you believe things that weren't true, Vivian continued. You were with me, Jack. We were together. But after the accident, Laura stepped in, and she took over your life. I know it's hard to believe, but deep down, you know something's off. That's why you responded to me. I could barely breathe. But Max, Laura, we're a family. Vivian looked away, a slight frown tugging at her lips. Yes, you have a family now, and I understand why this is difficult. But you deserve to know the truth. And if you want that, Jack, I can't tell you everything. But it'll change the way you see everything and everyone in your life. Her words hung heavily in the air, her truth colliding with everything I thought I knew. I wanted to believe she was wrong, that I hadn't been manipulated by the woman I shared my life with. But something inside me, a nagging, dark feeling, told me she was right. That there was more to this story, to my past, than I could have ever imagined. As I looked at her, I realized that my life was about to be split into two parts. The life I thought I knew, and the dark, tangled mess of secrets waiting to be unraveled. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions of my life, while the weight of Vivian's words hung over me like a shadow. Laura carried on as if nothing had changed, smiling as she packed Max's lunch, discussing her plans for the week, unaware of the turmoil brewing inside me. Every time I looked at her, I felt a strange mix of familiarity and distrust, as if I were seeing her through a cracked lens. Vivian had agreed to meet me again, sensing I needed more than her first bombshell revelation. I needed details, dates, anything that would make sense of the claims she'd made. The day of our second meeting, I left the house with my heart pounding, feeling like I was about to step into a world I wasn't prepared to face. She was waiting in the same corner booth at Greenwood Cafe, a faint, almost sad smile on her lips as she watched me approach. I could barely get my words out before she gestured for me to sit down. You came back, she said softly, as if she hadn't been sure I would. I need answers, I replied, voice strained. If you're telling the truth, then you need to explain everything. Vivian took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine. All right, Jack, I'll tell you everything. But know that this won't be easy to hear. I leaned forward, steeling myself. She began slowly, as though piecing together fragments of her own memory. We met 8 years ago, she started. You were different then, carefree, always curious about the world. We met through mutual friends, and for years it was just us. Her gaze softened, a faint smile touching her lips as she relived those memories. We talked about traveling, starting a family one day. You told me about dreams you had of opening a little coffee shop, or maybe even moving to the coast. I tried to place the person she was describing, but it felt like she was talking about a stranger. Yet there was an undeniable familiarity in her words, a strange warmth that tugged at something deep within me. Then came the accident, she continued, her voice dipping low. You were driving home late one night. It was raining heavily, and you lost control. The doctors said the trauma affected your memory severely. I was told there was a chance you'd never remember those years. And for a while, it seemed like that was the case. I swallowed hard, my mind reeling. None of this sounded remotely familiar, but at the same time, the way she spoke, the genuine pain in her voice, it was impossible to ignore. I tried to reach you, Jack, she said, her voice trembling. I called, wrote letters, but you never responded. And one day, I found out why. She looked away, anger and sadness flashing across her face. Laura had moved into your life. She was already there, by your side, telling you that she was the only one who cared about you, that she was your support system. And she let you believe that you had no one else. The word struck me with the force of a punch. So, you're saying she lied to me? Vivian nodded, her gaze unyielding. Yes. She took advantage of your vulnerability, Jack. You don't remember any of this because Laura made sure you wouldn't. She built a life with you on a foundation of lies, making you believe she was the one constant through everything. But it wasn't true. She knew about me. She knew everything, and she still did this. I felt my stomach twist with anger and disbelief. How could Laura, the woman I trusted, have done something so manipulative? Every word Vivian said seemed to chip away at the image of Laura I'd held onto for years, replacing it with someone far colder, more calculating. Why would she do this? I asked, my voice a strained whisper. She could have told me the truth. Vivian shrugged, pain flashing in her eyes. Maybe she loved you in her own way, but it doesn't excuse what she did. She took advantage of a broken man, Jack. She built a life around a lie. A storm of emotions surged within me. Anger, betrayal, a sadness so profound it felt like I was being torn apart. Vivian watched me silently, as though she knew exactly what I was feeling. You deserve the truth, she said, her voice gentle. And I'm here to give it to you, no matter how painful it is. For a moment, we sat in silence. I thought about Laura, about Max, about the life I'd believed was solid, real. How much of it had been carefully crafted to hide the truth from me? Had I been living in a facade built on deceit? Vivian's voice broke through my thoughts. You don't have to believe me right away, she said quietly. But I wanted you to know. You needed to know. I looked at her, the ache in my chest making it hard to breathe. I don't know what to do, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. How am I supposed to go back to my life, to my son, to Laura? Vivian reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. Take your time, Jack, but know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere this time. Her words held a depth of sincerity that felt like a lifeline. I didn't fully understand the web of deception I'd been trapped in, but I knew one thing for certain: Vivian was telling the truth. Somewhere deep down, I could feel it, a sense of clarity piercing through the confusion. As I left the cafe, my mind buzzed with the painful revelations I'd just uncovered. Each step felt heavier, the weight of Vivian's words pressing down on me, reshaping the very foundation of my life. I'd gone there looking for answers, but all I'd found were more questions, doubts, and a nagging sense that everything I thought I knew was unraveling before my eyes. That evening, as I sat alone in the car before heading back inside, I found myself staring at our house, wondering how much of it was built on truth. I watched Laura through the window, playing with Max, laughing without a care in the world. And all I could think about was the secret she'd kept buried from me, a secret that was now clawing its way to the surface, threatening to tear apart the life we had built. The intrusion of the past was here, and it wouldn't be ignored. After that second meeting with Vivian, the doubts she had sown only grew stronger. I tried to shake off her words, tried to tell myself they were just the fantasies of a stranger who had no place in my life anymore. But no matter how hard I tried, the cracks were forming, and it was impossible to ignore the shifting reality around me. Laura was everywhere laughing with Max, talking about plans for the weekend, showing me photos of a trip she wanted us to take. But I couldn't unsee the shadow of deception that hung between us now. The more I observed, the more unsettling details I noticed. Things that seemed insignificant before suddenly felt heavy with hidden meaning. Laura had always been quick to brush off any mention of my past, diverting conversations to our future instead. I'd always believed that she was simply trying to help me move forward, that she loved me too much to want me to dwell on what was gone. But now, that same caring sentiment felt carefully orchestrated away to keep me from searching for a life I no longer remembered. Max's laughter broke through my thoughts one evening as he sat at the kitchen table, crayons scattered around him. He looked so happy, his eyes gleaming with that innocent joy only children have. I loved him fiercely. He was my son, my heart. And yet, in the back of my mind, Vivian's warning lingered. I told myself it was just paranoia, that I was being irrational. But a single thought kept returning, gnawing at me with relentless persistence. What if he's not my son? The doubt took root, and I found myself searching Max's features, looking for myself in him. I felt sick for even entertaining the thought, but once it was there, I couldn't escape it. Every time I looked at him, I questioned if there was something I was missing, some truth that had been kept from me all along. My gaze drifted from Max to Laura, and I realized how tightly she held this illusion together, how well she maintained our lives. Finally, I couldn't resist any longer. I ordered a DNA test kit. The idea felt absurd, surreal, like something out of a bad movie, but my instincts wouldn't let me ignore it. I did it quickly, one morning while Laura was still asleep. I told Max I was playing a funny game, and he happily let me swab his cheek. I sent it off, feeling like I was betraying my own family, like I was somehow tainting the life I'd built. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't find peace until I had the answer. The waiting was torture. Every day, I went through the motions, hiding my anxiety, trying to be the father Max needed. I watched Laura, wondering if she suspected something, if she noticed the way I looked at her now. But she seemed oblivious, carrying on with her usual warmth, her effortless smile. Then, a few days later, the results arrived in my inbox. My hands trembled as I opened the email, the room suddenly too silent, too still. I scanned the document, reading through clinical terms and percentages until my eyes landed on the one sentence that shattered everything. Paternity is excluded. Max was not my biological son. The world seemed to tilt, the edges of my vision blurring as the reality of those words settled in. Max was not mine. Laura had known this, lived with this, and never once shared the truth. I'd loved him, raised him as my own, while she had knowingly allowed me to live in a lie. All those tender moments, those precious memories, they were real for me, but to her, they must have been stained with her deception. It took everything in me not to confront her that very moment. I felt betrayed on a level I'd never experienced before, an ache that went beyond anger and settled deep within my heart. I'd built my life around a family that wasn't mine. The love I'd given, the sacrifices I'd made, it all felt hollow now, a mockery of the family I thought we were. For days, I grappled with how to face her. I would look at Laura, the woman I'd shared my life with, and feel like I was looking at a stranger. And Max, my sweet, innocent Max, I couldn't bear to let him see my heart break. He was still my son, regardless of blood, and he didn't deserve the weight of Laura's lies. But the betrayal cut deep, leaving wounds I wasn't sure could heal. During this time, I found myself reaching out to Vivian. She was a lifeline in a storm I didn't know how to navigate. She listened without judgment, offering me solace in the face of truths that felt unbearable. She knew what Laura had done, and though she didn't push me to make any decisions, I could see the hope in her eyes, the quiet yearning that maybe, just maybe, I would leave Laura and finally come back to her. Vivian's presence was a balm, a reminder of a life I had lost but now glimpsed through her memories. She told me more about the years we'd spent together, the places we'd visited, the dreams we'd shared. Slowly, pieces of those memories began to surface. Her laughter, her smile, the way she looked at me with such warmth and trust, it felt like coming home to something I hadn't known I'd lost. And with each memory that returned, my anger toward Laura grew. I saw her deception as something cruel, calculated, a way to steal my life, my happiness, and replace it with a version that suited her. I'd been robbed not only of my memories but of my right to choose my own path. The pieces of my past were beginning to fall into place, but the picture they formed was dark, twisted. I didn't know who I was anymore, or who I was supposed to be. The person I thought I was, the family I thought I had, it was all built on lies. I knew what had to come next. I couldn't go on living in this broken reality, pretending everything was fine. I needed to confront Laura, to make her face the truth she'd buried for so long. And once I did, there would be no turning back. The life we had shared, the family we had built, it was all about to unravel, and I would be the one to pull the thread. The email with the DNA test results arrived a week later, right as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a strange orange glow through the kitchen window. Laura was upstairs putting Max to bed, her laughter drifting softly down the stairs. I sat alone at the kitchen table, phone in hand, unable to move. It felt as though time had slowed down, every tick of the clock stretching out, mocking me as I built up the courage to open that email. My hands shook as I tapped the screen, each click sounding louder than the last. I skimmed through the clinical jargon and technical percentages, my heart pounding as I scanned for the one line that mattered. And then, there it was, stark and cold, staring back at me. Paternity is excluded. The word struck me like a physical blow. Max, my son, my little boy, the one I'd tucked in every night, taught to ride a bike, and watched grow from an infant into this bundle of laughter and curiosity was not mine. In that moment, everything felt surreal. The walls around me, the life I'd built, the love I'd poured into my family, it all felt like an illusion, a facade ready to shatter. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt as if someone had punched the air out of my lungs. The entire world seemed to tilt, my mind spinning with shock and disbelief. A cold, sinking feeling settled in my chest, an ache I couldn't describe. I wanted to tell myself it was a mistake, that somehow the test had gone wrong. But deep down, I knew it hadn't. Laura's laughter floated down the stairs, and I felt an unfamiliar rage building inside me. She had known. All these years, she'd known that Max wasn't mine. She'd watched me love him, raise him, invest everything I had into him, while hiding this truth. She'd built our life around a lie, allowing me to fall deeper and deeper into this constructed reality. In the silence of the kitchen, memories began to resurface. Small, almost forgettable moments that suddenly carried a new weight. I remembered the few times I'd questioned her about Max's birth, the way she quickly brushed it off or changed the subject, or how she'd always seemed eager to avoid discussing our early years together, preferring to focus on the present, on our family and our future. It had seemed innocent then, like she was simply loving and protective. But now, it felt like a carefully crafted strategy to keep me in the dark. With trembling hands, I locked my phone and buried my face in them, trying to hold back the wave of betrayal that was overwhelming me. I'd loved Max as my own, with every fiber of my being. And to learn now that it had all been built on Laura's deception, it was a pain I hadn't known was possible. I sat there for what felt like hours, consumed by a storm of emotions: anger, sorrow, confusion. Part of me wanted to go upstairs, shake her awake, and demand answers. But another part of me was afraid. Afraid of what I might find. Afraid of how deep her lies went. I realized I wasn't just grieving the loss of a son. I was grieving the loss of my entire life as I knew it. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it all. I kept replaying moments from the past, sifting through years of memories, searching for any signs I'd missed, any clues to Laura's betrayal. I felt foolish, humiliated. I'd been living in a reality she had shaped for me, trusting her implicitly, building a life around someone who had twisted my world to suit her own purposes. The next morning, I woke early, exhausted but resolute. I knew I couldn't go on like this, carrying this knowledge in silence, but I didn't know how to confront her. The idea of shattering the life we'd built terrified me. I didn't want to hurt Max. He was innocent in all of this, but I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. I deserved answers. I deserved to know the extent of her deceit. I reached out to Vivian. She was the only person who understood, the only person who could give me some clarity in this chaos. When I met her later that afternoon, I barely managed to explain what I'd learned. She listened quietly, her face a mix of sadness and anger as I told her about the DNA test. "Jack, you didn't deserve this," she said softly, placing a reassuring hand on mine. "No one deserves to be lied to like this." For a moment, I felt a surge of relief, of validation. I wasn't alone in my anger. Vivian understood the betrayal, the pain. She had been the one person from my past who hadn't twisted the truth to serve her own interests. As I looked at her, I felt a strange, unexpected sense of connection, a bond forged by shared suffering. She sighed, her eyes searching mine. "What are you going to do?" I shook my head, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. "I don't know. Part of me wants to confront her, to make her feel the pain she's put me through. But then there's Max. He's just a little boy. He doesn't deserve to lose his family." Vivian's gaze softened. "You're a good man, Jack, and a wonderful father. No one can take that away from you." Her words cut through my despair, a balm to my wounded heart. But they also made me realize just how much I had to lose. Max was my world, my heart, and despite everything, I couldn't turn my back on him. But I also couldn't continue living a lie. I needed to confront Laura to see if there was any part of her that had ever truly loved me, or if it had all been an elaborate act. That evening, I returned home to find Laura waiting in the kitchen, a smile on her face as she asked about my day. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the DNA test. The woman I saw wasn't the woman I thought I knew. She was someone who had betrayed me in the deepest way possible. "Jack?" she asked, sensing my hesitation. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I was on the edge of a precipice, about to plunge into the unknown. But I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. "Laura," I began, my voice low and steady. "We need to talk." The conversation with Laura never left my mind. Her tears, her attempts to explain, the weak excuses that she hoped would somehow erase the pain of betrayal, it all just replayed in my head, over and over, like a broken record. She'd admitted the truth. She knew Max wasn't mine, knew from the very beginning, and yet, she had let me love him, raise him, sacrifice for him, all while weaving her lie into the fabric of our life together. I had tried to find forgiveness, for Max's sake, for the sake of whatever remnants of our life together still existed. But the betrayal was too deep, the wound too raw to even think of healing. I felt like a ghost in my own home, trapped in a life that no longer felt real. Every glance at Laura only reminded me of the lie she had buried me under. And I knew I couldn't stay in that house, pretending we could ever be the same. It was then that Vivian became my refuge. I reached out to her more often, our conversations growing longer and more personal. She listened to my anger, my frustration, every twisted thought that crossed my mind. In her presence, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone who had finally been given a chance to reclaim what was stolen from him. She understood me in a way that no one else could, and for the first time since my world had come crashing down, I felt seen, understood, even cared for. "Jack, you don't deserve this," she said one evening as we walked by the river. The city lights cast soft reflections on the water, and the night was quiet, peaceful in a way that my mind hadn't felt in weeks. "You deserved a life built on truth, not lies. And Laura, she didn't just betray you. She betrayed the man you could have been, the life you could have had." Vivian's words struck a chord, her voice brimming with the conviction I wished I could feel myself. She spoke the truth I'd buried beneath my sense of obligation, my hesitation to break away for Max's sake. I felt a strange, vengeful energy growing inside me. I can't shake the feeling that she's getting away with everything, that she'll live her life, keep Max, while I'm the one left to pick up the pieces of a life I didn't ask for. Vivian's hand found mine, a gentle reassurance that somehow felt like it was giving me strength. "Then don't let her," she said softly. "You've been punished enough. Maybe it's time Laura feels the consequences of her actions. You deserve to take back control, to be with someone who's honest with you." As her words settled over me, I looked at Vivian, really looked at her. She had been the constant I didn't know I needed, the woman who had given me truth when my own life had become nothing but a lie. And as I looked into her eyes, I saw an invitation, a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I leaned in, our faces inches apart, my heartbeat quickening. This moment felt like the first real decision I'd made in ages, a choice that was fully mine. I closed the distance between us, finding in Vivian the warmth, the trust, the love that Laura's lies had stolen from me. In her arms, I felt like a man reborn. Our connection grew over the following weeks. We met in secret, finding comfort in each other, sharing memories of the life we'd once had and making new ones that were built on truth. With Vivian, I felt alive again, felt seen in a way Laura had never allowed. She reminded me of who I was, who I could have been, and every time we met, I felt that anger toward Laura ease, replaced by a quiet determination to reclaim my life on my own terms. Together, Vivian and I began planning my departure. We would leave everything behind, start fresh in a new place where the shadows of betrayal couldn't reach us. She spoke of small towns on the coast, of quiet lives and endless possibilities, of a life we could build from the ground up. And as I listened to her, I felt the weight of Laura's lies slipping away, replaced by the excitement of a future untainted by deceit. One evening, as I was preparing to leave Laura's house for the last time, Vivian called, her voice full of warmth and anticipation. "It's time, Jack. Time to leave all of this behind." I took one last look around the house. The memories I'd built there felt hollow now, mere ghosts of a life I'd thought was real. I'd already packed my things, my essentials ready to go. I left a letter for Laura, explaining everything I'd felt, every piece of betrayal I could no longer carry. But this time, I felt no anger, only a sense of relief that I was finally free. Vivian and I drove away from the city that night, leaving Laura and the twisted version of my past behind. I felt the weight lifting, the burden of lies and deception slipping away with every mile. As the city lights faded in the rearview mirror, I felt a surge of hope, a future that stretched out before me, unburdened by the past. With Vivian by my side, I knew I could start fresh, build a life that was truly mine. Laura was left behind, alone with the consequences of her own deceit. And for the first time in years, I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible, a life lived on my terms, with someone who had given me back my truth, my freedom, my chance to start anew. The day of the confrontation felt charged, the air in the house thick with an unspoken tension that Laura hadn't noticed yet. I'd come home early, too restless to pretend that anything was normal anymore. My mind was set I would lay it all out, the lies, the betrayal, the DNA test. And once she had nothing left to hide, I'd finally be free to walk away. When Laura came in from running errands, she found me sitting at the kitchen table, hands clasped, eyes steady. She looked at me, brow furrowed, sensing something was wrong. "Jack, are you all right?" "Sit down, Laura," I said, voice calm but firm. The weight of my words seemed to register with her, and her eyes widened slightly. She took a seat across from me, her hands nervously folding and unfolding a napkin, but she said nothing, waiting for me to speak. I took a deep breath, feeling a pang of anger and sadness rise in me again. "We need to talk about Mac." She blinked, her expression shifting to confusion. "What about Max?" "Jack, what's going on?" "I had a DNA test done," I said, my voice steady but cold. "Max isn't my son, Laura." Her face went pale, and her mouth opened, but no words came out. For a moment, she just stared at me, the shock evident in her eyes. But then, like a switch had flipped, she looked down, pressing her lips together, unable to meet my gaze. "You knew, didn't you?" I continued, my voice low but unyielding. "You knew from the beginning, Jack." I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. It's not what you think." "Oh, really?" I cut her off, my anger finally surfacing. "It's not what I think. Then why don't you explain it to me, Laura? Explain how you let me believe Max was my son, how you built an entire life around a lie." She swallowed, tears welling up in her eyes as she struggled to find the words. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she finally whispered, voice breaking. "When you lost your memory, I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe it was a second chance for us." "A second chance?" I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. "A second chance at what, exactly? At pretending? At lying to my face every single day?" Tears slipped down her cheeks, but I felt no sympathy. Her pain couldn't touch the betrayal I felt, the anger that had been building inside me for weeks. She looked at me, desperation in her eyes. "Jack, please. I didn't think it would matter. I didn't think you'd ever find out. I thought we could be happy." You thought you could be happy," I snapped, the bitterness lacing my words. "You let me believe Max was mine, knowing that one day this could all come crashing down. And now it has, Laura. All of it. And for what? Because you were afraid to tell me the truth?" She shook her head, sobbing quietly now. "I was scared, Jack. I loved you, and I didn't want to lose you. And when you came back from the accident, you didn't remember. I thought maybe I could protect you from the truth, protect Max." "Don't make this about protecting me or Max," I said, cutting her off again. "This was about you, about what you wanted. You had the chance to tell me the truth, Laura, and instead, You chose the lie. You chose it every single day. The room fell silent, her sobs the only sound echoing in the stillness. I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my composure. There was so much I wanted to say, so much anger and hurt I wanted her to understand. But I knew words wouldn't reach her. She had built a world around herself, a fortress of lies, and she'd locked me inside it without a second thought. When she finally lifted her head, her face was streaked with tears, eyes red and pleading. Please, Jack, we can work through this. We've built a life together. Max, he loves you. He needs you. You're the only father he's ever known. Her words twisted the knife even deeper, and I felt a fresh wave of anger. Max is innocent in this, Laura. He didn't ask for this, and he doesn't deserve to be dragged through it. But you made a choice for both of us, a choice that has consequences. And now you have to live with them. Please, Jack, she whispered, reaching across the table, her hand trembling. But I didn't take it. I stood up, the weight of the truth pressing down on me, and I looked down at her, feeling like a stranger in my own life. I'm done, Laura, I said quietly, my voice hard. I can't pretend anymore. I've spent too long living in your version of reality. I don't know who I am in this life you built, and I don't know if I ever did. Her face crumpled, and I turned away, unable to bear the sight of her anymore. I walked to the doorway, pausing one last time as I looked back. Tell Max. Tell him whatever you want. But don't lie to him the way you lied to me. And with that, I left. The weight I'd carried for weeks, the anger and pain, finally began to ease, replaced by a hollow emptiness. I had given her my trust, my heart, my loyalty, and she twisted it all into something unrecognizable. But as I walked away, I felt a flicker of freedom, a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild my life on my own terms. I knew Vivian was waiting for me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt that I was finally closing the chapter on a life built on deception. The day I left, I didn't look back. The house that had once been a symbol of family and warmth felt like a distant shell, a reminder of all that had been lost. The pain of betrayal was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it no longer defined me. With each step away from that house, I felt lighter, unburdened by Laura's lies and the illusion I had lived in for too long. Vivian was waiting for me at the small cafe where we'd spent so many hours together, piecing together my past and rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under years of deception. She stood as I approached, her eyes filled with understanding and empathy. She didn't ask how it went with Laura. She already knew the answer. Instead, she reached out, taking my hand with a quiet strength that reassured me. Are you ready? She asked softly, her voice steady and calm. Yes, I replied, my voice filled with a determination I hadn't felt in years. I was ready to leave it all behind, the lies, the guilt, the anger. I was ready for a fresh start with someone who had been nothing but honest with me. With Vivian, I felt grounded, free to be myself without pretense or hidden truths. For the first time, my life was mine to live, and I was no longer tied to a past built on someone else's manipulations. We spent the following weeks planning our move, excitedly discussing where we might go, what kind of life we could build together. Vivian's presence was a balm, easing the wounds that Laura's betrayal had left behind. With her, I felt a sense of possibility, a freedom to create a new beginning untainted by the pain of the past. One evening, as we packed up the few belongings I cared to take with me, Vivian paused, looking at me with that gentle smile I'd come to cherish. Are you sure you're ready for this? She asked, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I looked around the room, at the boxes and bags that represented the last pieces of my old life. I am, I said, nodding with conviction. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be. We left the city in the early hours of the morning, driving with the windows down as the sun began to rise, casting warm light over the empty roads ahead. The feeling of leaving everything behind was exhilarating. A clean slate stretched out before us, a future built on truth and trust. I had no regrets, only a sense of relief that I was finally free. Our destination was a quiet coastal town, far from the reminders of my past life. It was a place Vivian had dreamed of, somewhere peaceful where we could start over, away from the weight of history and expectation. The town welcomed us with open arms, its sleepy streets and cozy cafes a perfect backdrop for the life we wanted to build. With each passing day, I felt myself healing, the scars of betrayal fading as I immersed myself in our new life. I took a job at a local repair shop, a far cry from my corporate life but rewarding in ways I hadn't anticipated. I found satisfaction in the simplicity of the work, in the honest, straightforward nature of the people I worked with. It felt grounding, real, something I could pour myself into without the fear of hidden motives or buried secrets. Vivian and I spent our evenings walking along the shore, talking about the future, about the things we wanted to do, the places we wanted to see. She was my anchor, the one who had reminded me of who I was beneath all the layers of betrayal and pain. Her love was a quiet, steady force, never demanding, always accepting, and it made me realize how much I had missed being truly seen. One evening, as we watched the waves roll in under the fading light, Vivian turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. "The life you had before, with Laura?" I thought about it, letting the question settle. "No," I answered, surprised at how easily the answer came. "I miss Max. I miss the moments we had together, the way I thought we were a family. But that life, it wasn't real. It was built on lies, and I don't miss living in someone else's version of the truth." She nodded, her hand slipping into mine, her warmth grounding me. "Max will always be a part of you, Jack. You gave him your love, and that can never be taken away." Her words eased the ache in my heart, the lingering guilt I felt for leaving him. Max was innocent in all of this, and I knew he would always hold a place in my heart. But I also knew I couldn't sacrifice myself any longer, couldn't live in a life that had been twisted beyond recognition. Months passed, and with each day, I felt more at home in this new life, more at peace with the choices I had made. Vivian and I built a life of simplicity, of quiet joy and deep connection. I learned to trust again, to open my heart to someone who had never given me a reason to doubt her. We became a team, each day spent building a future based on honesty and mutual respect. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch of our small cottage overlooking the sea, Vivian turned to me, her eyes filled with that quiet joy I had come to love. "Do you ever think about what you would say to Laura now?" she asked, her tone gentle, not prying. I thought for a moment, realizing that the anger, the bitterness that had once consumed me, had finally faded. "I would thank her," I said, surprising even myself, "because without her lies, without everything that happened, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have found you." Vivian smiled, her hand reaching for mine. "Then maybe she gave us both a gift," she said softly, her voice full of warmth and understanding. As I looked out at the sea, the endless horizon stretching before us, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. The betrayal, the pain, the anger, they were all part of the past, a story I had left behind. In their place was a new beginning, a life I had chosen for myself, built on a foundation of truth and love. With Vivian by my side, I knew I could face whatever the future held. The past had returned, but it no longer defined me. I was free, and for the first time, I was exactly where I was meant to be.